The Doctrine of Eternal Life. Egyptian Belief in a Future Life. The Doctrine of Eternal Life in the 6th Dynasty. The ideas and beliefs which the Egyptians held in reference to a future existence are not readily to be defined, owing to the many difficulties in translating religious texts and in harmonizing the statements made in different works of different periods. Some confusion of details also seems to have existed in the minds of the Egyptians themselves, which cannot be cleared up until the literature of the subject has been further studied and until more texts have been published. That the Egyptians believed in a future life of some kind is certain, and the doctrine of eternal existence is the leading feature of their religion, and is enunciated with the utmost clearness in all periods. Whether this belief had its origin in Anu, the chief city of the worship of the sun god, is not certain, but is very probable. For already in the pyramid texts we find the idea of everlasting life associated with the sun's existence. And Pepi the first is said to be the giver of life, stability, power, health, and all joy of heart, like the sun, living forever. The sun rose each day in renewed strength and vigor, and the renewal of youth in a future life was the aim and object of every Egyptian believer. To this end, all the religious literature of Egypt was composed. Let us take the following extracts from texts of the 6th dynasty as illustrations. Hail Unas, not hast thou gone, behold, as one dead. Thou hast gone, as one living, to sit upon the throne of Osiris. O Ra, turn cometh to thee, thy son, cometh to thee Unas. Thy son is this of thy body forever. O turn, thy son is this Osiris. Thou hast given his sustenance, and he liveth. He liveth and liveth, Unas this. Not dieth he, not dieth Unas this. Setteth Unas in life in Amenta. He hath eaten the knowledge of God. Every existence is for all eternity, and to everlasting in his Sa this. What he willeth, he doeth. He hateth, not doth he do. Live life, not shalt thou die. The doctrine of eternal life in the 18th dynasty. In the Papyrus of Ani, the deceased is represented as having come to a place remote and far away, where there is neither air to breathe nor water to drink, but where he holds converse with Tamu. In answer to his question, "How long have I to live?" the great god of Anu answers, "Thou shalt exist for millions of years, a period of millions of years." In the 84th chapter, as given in the same papyrus, the infinite duration of the past and future existence of the soul, as well as its divine nature, is proclaimed by Ani in the words, "I am Shu, the god of unformed matter. My soul is God, my soul is eternity." When the deceased identifies himself with Shu, he makes the period of his existence coeval with that of Tamu Ra. For example, he existed before Osiris and the other gods of his company. These two passages prove the identity of the belief in eternal life in the 18th dynasty with that of the 5th and 6th dynasties. But while we have this evidence of the Egyptian belief in eternal life, we are nowhere told that man's corruptible body will rise again. Indeed, the following extracts show that the idea prevailed that the body lay in the earth while the soul or spirit lived in heaven. Soul to heaven, body to earth. Thy essence is in heaven, thy body to earth. Heaven hath thy soul, earth hath thy body. Constancy in the belief in the resurrection. There is, however, no doubt that from the first to last, the Egyptians firmly believed that besides the soul, there was some other element of the man that would rise again. The preservation of the corruptible body, too, was in some way connected with the life in the world to come, and its preservation was necessary to ensure eternal life. Otherwise, the prayers recited to this end would have been futile, and the time-honored custom of mummifying the dead would have had no meaning. The never-ending existence of the soul is asserted in a passage quoted above without reference to Osiris, but the frequent mention of the uniting of his bones and of the gathering together of his members, and the doing away with all corruption from his body, seems to show that the pious Egyptian connected these things with the resurrection of his own body in some form, and he argued that what had been done for him who was proclaimed to be the giver and source of life must be necessary for mortal man. The Khat, or physical body, the physical body of man considered as a whole, was called Khat, a word which seems to be connected with the idea of something which is liable to decay. The word is also applied to the mummified body in the tomb, as we know from the words, "My body, Khat, is buried." Such a body was attributed to the god Osiris, 162nd chapter of the Book of the Dead. His great divine body rested in Anu. In this respect, the god and the deceased were on an equality. As we have seen above, the body neither leaves the tomb nor reappears on earth. Yet, its preservation was necessary. Thus, the deceased addressed to Mu, "Hail to thee, O my father Osiris! I have come, and I have embalmed this my flesh, so that my body may not decay. I am whole, even as my father Khepr was whole, who is to me the type of that which passeth not away. Come then, O form, and give breath unto me, O Lord of breath, O thou who art greater than thy compeers. Stablish thou me, and form thou me, O thou who art Lord of the grave. Grant thou to me to endure forever, even as thou didst grant unto thy father Tamu to endure. And his body neither passed away nor decayed. I have not done that which is hateful unto thee. Nay, I have spoken that which thy Ka loveth. Repulse thou me not, and cast thou me not behind thee, O Tamu, to decay, even as thou doest unto every god, and unto every goddess, and unto every beast and creeping thing, which perisheth when his soul hath gone forth from him after his death, and which falleth in pieces after his decay. Homage to thee, O my father Osiris. Thy flesh suffered no decay. There were no worms in thee. Thou didst not crumble away. Thou didst not wither away. Thou didst not become corruption and worms. And I myself am Khepr. I shall possess my flesh forever and ever. I shall not decay. I shall not crumble away. I shall not wither away. I shall not become corruption. The Sahu, or spiritual body. But the body does not lie in the tomb inoperative, for by the prayers and ceremonies on the day of burial, it is endowed with the power of changing into a Sahu, or spiritual body. Thus we have such phrases as, I germinate like the plants. My flesh germinateth. I exist. I exist. I live. I live. I germinate. I germinate. Thy soul liveth. Thy body germinateth by the command of Ra himself, without diminution and without defect, like unto Ra forever and ever. The word Sahu, though at times written with the determinative of a mummy lying on a bier like cot body, indicates a body which has obtained a degree of knowledge and power and glory, whereby it becomes henceforth lasting and incorruptible. The body which has become a Sahu has the power of associating with the soul and of holding converse with it. In this form, it can ascend into heaven and dwell with the gods, and with the Sahu of the gods, and with the souls of the righteous. In the pyramid texts, we have these passages. Rise up, thou Teti this, stand up, thy mighty one being strong. Sit thou with the gods. Do thou that which did Osiris in the great house in Anu. Thou hast received thy saw. Not shall be fettered thy foot in heaven. Not shalt thou be turned back upon earth. Hail to thee, Teta, on this thy day. Thou art standing before Ra, as he cometh from the cast. Thou art endued with this thy saw among the souls. His duration of life is eternity. His limit of life is everlastingness in his saw. I am a saw with his soul. In the late edition of the Book of the Dead, published by Lepsius, the deceased is said to look upon his body and to rest upon his Sahu, and souls are said to enter into their Sahu. And a passage existent both in this and the older Theban edition makes the deceased to receive the Sahu of the god Osiris. But that Egyptian writers at times confused the Khat with the Sahu is clear from a passage in the Book of Respirations, where it is said, Hail, Osiris, thy name endureth, thy body is established, thy Sahu germinateth. In other texts, the word germinate is applied only to the natural body. The Ab, or heart. In close connection with the natural and spiritual bodies stood the heart, or rather that part of it which was the seat of the power of life and the fountain of good and evil thoughts. And in addition to the natural and spiritual bodies, man also bade an abstract individuality or personality endowed with all his characteristic attributes. This abstract personality had an absolutely independent existence. It could move freely from place to place, separating itself from or uniting itself to the body at will, and also enjoying life with the gods in heaven. This was the Ka, a word which at times conveys the meaning of its Coptic equivalent of image, genius, double character, disposition, and mental attributes. The funeral offerings of meat, cakes, ale, wine, unguents, etc., were intended for the Ka. The scent of the burnt incense was grateful to it. The Ka dwelt in the man's statue, just as the Ka of a god inhabited the statue of the god. In this respect, the Ka seems to be identical with the Sekhem, or image. In the remotest times, the tombs had special chambers, wherein the Ka was worshipped and received offerings. The priesthood numbered among its body an order of men who bore the name of priests of the Ka and who performed services in honor of the Ka in the Ka chapel. In the text of Unas, the deceased is said to be happy with his Ka in the next world, and his Ka is joined unto his body in the great dwelling, his body having been buried in the lowest chamber. His Ka cometh forth to him. Of Pepi the first it is said, Washed is thy Ka, sitteth thy Ka, and eateth bread with thee unceasingly forever. Thou art pure, thy Ka is pure, thy Ka is pure, thy form is pure. The Ka, as we have seen, could eat food, and it was necessary to provide food for it. In the 12th dynasty and in later periods, the gods are entreated to grant meat and drink to the Ka of the deceased. And it seems as if the Egyptians thought that the future welfare of the spiritual body depended upon the maintenance of a constant supply of sepulchre offerings. Circumstances rendered it impossible to continue the material supply of food. The Ka fed upon the offerings painted on the walls of the tomb, which were transformed into suitable nourishment by means of the prayers of the living. When there were neither material offerings nor painted similitudes to feed upon, it seems as if the Ka must have perished. But the texts are not definite on this point. The following is a specimen of the Ka's petition for food, written in the 18th dynasty. May the gods grant that I go into and come forth from my tomb. May the majesty refresh its shade. May I drink water from my cistern every day. May all my limbs grow. May Happy give unto me bread and flowers of all kinds in their season. May I pass over my estate every day without ceasing. May my soul alight upon the branches of the groves which I have planted. May I make myself cool beneath my sycamores. May I eat the bread which they provide. May I have my mouth that I may speaketh therewith like the followers of Horus. May I come forth to heaven. May I descend to earth. May I never be shut out upon the road. May there never be done unto me that which my soul abhorreth. Let not my soul be imprisoned, but may I be among the venerable and favorable ones. May I plow my lands in the field of Aru. May I arrive at the field of peace. May one come out to me with vessels of ale and cakes and bread of the lords of eternity. May I receive meat from the altars of the great. I, the Ka of the prophet, am Su. The Ba, or soul, to that part of man which beyond all doubt was believed to enjoy an eternal existence in heaven in a state of glory, the Egyptians gave the name Ba, a word which means something like sublime, noble, or which has always hitherto been translated by soul. The Ba is not incorporeal, for although it dwells in the Ka and is in some respects like the heart, the principle of life in man, still it possesses both substance and form. In form, it is depicted as a human-headed hawk, and in nature and substance, it is stated to be exceedingly refined or ethereal. It revisited the body in the tomb and reanimated it and conversed with it. It could take upon itself any shape that it pleased, and it had the power of passing into heaven and of dwelling with the perfected souls there. It was eternal. As the Ba was closely associated with the Ka, it partook of the funeral offerings, and in one aspect of its existence, at least, it was liable to decay if not properly and sufficiently nourished. In the pyramid texts, the permanent dwelling place of the Ba, or soul, is heaven with the gods, whose life it shares. Behold, Unas, come forth on day, this in the form exact of a soul living. Their soul is in Unas. Standeth thy soul among the gods. Hail, Pepi, this cometh to thee, the eye of Horus. It speaketh with thee. Cometh to thee thy soul, which is among the gods. Pure is thy soul among the gods. As liveth Osiris, and as liveth the soul in Netat, so liveth Pepi this. It placeth thy soul, Pepi, this, among the greater and lesser cycles of the gods, in the form of the Urei, are on the brow. Behold, Pepi, this. Thy soul is the soul of Anu. Behold, thy soul is the soul of Nekhen. Behold, thy soul is the soul of Pe. Behold, thy soul is a star living. Behold among its brethren. The Kahibit, or shadow. In connection with the Ka and Ba must be mentioned the Kahibit, or shadow of man, which the Egyptians regarded as a part of the human economy. It might be compared with the Umbra of the Greeks and Romans. It was supposed to have an entirely independent existence and to be able to separate itself from the body. It was free to move wherever it pleased, and like the Ka and Ba, partook of the funeral offerings in the tomb, which it visited at will. The mention of the shade, whether of a god or man, in the pyramid texts is unfrequent, and it is not easy to ascertain what views were held concerning it. But from the passage in the text of Unas, whether it is mentioned together with the souls and spirits and bones of the gods, it is evident that already at the early date its position in relation to man was well defined. From the collection of illustrations which Dr. Birch appended to his paper on the shade or shadow of the dead, it is quite clear that in latter times, at least the shadow was always associated with the soul and was believed to be always near it. And this view is supported by a passage in the 92nd chapter of the Book of the Dead, where it is said, "Let not be shut in my soul, let not be fettered my shadow. Let be opened the way for my soul and for my shadow. May it see the great God." And again in the 89th chapter, the deceased says, "May I look upon my soul and my shadow." The Ku, or intelligence. Another important and apparently eternal part of man was the Ku, which, judging from the meaning of the word, may be defined as a shining or translucent, intangible casing or covering of the body, which is frequently depicted in the form of a mummy. For want of a better word, Ku has often been translated shining one, glorious, intelligence, and the like. But in certain cases, it may be tolerably well rendered by spirit. The pyramid texts show us that the Kus of the gods lived in heaven, and thither wended the Ku of a man as soon as ever the prayers said over the dead enabled it to do so. Thus it is said, "Unas standeth with the Kus," and one of the gods is asked to give him his scepter among the Kus. When the souls of the gods entered into Unas, their Kus are with and round about them. To King Teta it is said, "He hath plucked his eye from himself. He hath given it unto thee to strengthen thee therewith, that thou mayest prevail with it among the Khus. And again, when the god Kent-Menueth has transported the king to heaven, the god Seb, who rejoices to meet him, is said to give him both hands and welcome him as a brother, to nurse him, and to place him among the imperishable Khus. In the 92nd chapter, the deceased is made to pray for the liberation of his soul, shadow, and Khu from the bondage of the tomb, and for deliverance from those whose dwellings are hidden, who fetter the souls, who fetter souls and Khus CCs, and who shut in the shadows of the dead. And in the 90th first chapter is a formula specially prepared to enable the Khu to pass from the tomb to the domains where Ra and Hathor dwell. The Sekhem, or form, yet another part of man, was supposed to exist in heaven, to which the Egyptians gave the name Sekhem. The word has been rendered by power, form, and the like, but it is very difficult to find any expression which will represent the Egyptian conception of Sekhem. It is mentioned in connection with the soul and Khu, as will be seen from the following passages from the pyramid texts. Cometh to thee thy Sekhem among the Khus. Pure is thy Sekhem among the Khus. Thou art pure, pure is thy Ka, pure is thy soul, pure is thy Sekhem. A name of Ra was Sekhem, the great Sekhem, and Unas is identified with him and called Great Sekhem, Sekhem among Sekhem. The Ren, or name. Finally, the name, Ren, of a man was believed to exist in heaven, and in the pyramid texts we are told that happy is Pepi this with his name, liveth Pepi this with his Ka. Thus, as we have seen, the whole man consisted of a natural body, a spiritual body, a heart, a double, a soul, a shadow, an intangible ethereal casing or spirit, a form, and a name. All these were, however, bound together inseparably, and the welfare of any single one of them concerned the welfare of all. For the well-being of the spiritual parts, it was necessary to preserve from decay the natural body, and certain passages in the pyramid texts seem to show that a belief in the resurrection of the natural body existed in the earliest dynasties. The texts are silent as to the time when the immortal part began its beatified existence, but it is probable that the Osiris of a man only attained to the full enjoyment of spiritual happiness after the funeral ceremonies had been duly performed and the ritual recited. Comparatively, few particulars are known of the manner of life of the soul in heaven, and though a number of interesting facts may be gleaned from the texts of all periods, it is very difficult to harmonize them. This result is due partly to the different views held by different schools of thought in ancient Egypt, and partly to the fact that on some points the Egyptians themselves seem to have had no decided opinions. We depend upon the pyramid texts for our knowledge of the earliest conceptions of a future life. The existence in heaven. The life of the Osiris of a man in heaven is at once material and spiritual, and it seems as if the Egyptians never succeeded in breaking away from their very ancient habit of confusing the things of the body with the things of the soul. They believed in an incorporeal and immortal part of man, the constituent elements of which flew to heaven after death and embalmment. Yet the theologians of the 6th dynasty had decided that there was some part of the deceased which could only mount to heaven by means of a ladder. In the pyramid of Teta, it is said, when Teta hath purified himself on the borders of this earth where Ra hath purified himself, he prayeth and setteth up the ladder, and those who dwell in the great place press Teta forward with their hands. In the pyramid of Pepi the first king is identified with this ladder. Isis saith, happy are they who see the Father, and the Nephthys saith, they who see the Father have rest, speaking unto the father of this Osiris, Pepi, when he cometh forth unto heaven among the stars and among the luminaries which never set, with the Uraeus on his brow and his book upon both his sides, the magic words at his feet. Pepi goeth forward unto his mother Nut, and he entereth therein in his name ladder. The gods who preside over this ladder are at one time Ra and Horus, and at another Horus and Set. In the pyramid of Unas it is said, Ra setteth up the ladder for Osiris, and Horus raiseth up the ladder for his father Osiris, when Osiris goeth to find his soul. One standeth on the one side, and the other standeth on the other, and Unas is betwixt them. Unas standeth up, and is Horus. He sitteth down, and is Set. And in the pyramid of Pepi the first we read, hail to thee, O ladder of God, hail to thee, O ladder of Set. Stand up, O ladder of God, stand up, O ladder of Set. Stand up, O ladder of Horus, whereon Osiris went forth into heaven. This Pepi is thy son, this Pepi is Horus. Thou hast given birth unto this Pepi, even as thou hast given birth unto the God, who is the Lord of the ladder. Thou hast given him the ladder of God, and thou hast given him the ladder of Set, whereon this Pepi hath gone forth into heaven. Every coup and every god stretcheth out his hand unto this Pepi, when he cometh forth into heaven by the ladder of God. That which he seeth and that which he heareth make him wise, and serve as food for him when he cometh forth into heaven by the ladder of God. Pepi riseth up like the Uraeus, which is on the brow of Set, and every coup and every god stretcheth out his hand unto Pepi on the ladder. Pepi hath gathered together his bones, he hath collected his flesh, and Pepi hath gone straightway into heaven by means of the two fingers of the God, who is the Lord of the ladder. Elsewhere we are told that Khonsu and Set carry the ladder of Pepi, and they set it up. When the Osiris of a man has entered into heaven as a living soul, he is regarded as one of those who hath eaten the eye of Horus. He walks among living ones. He becomes God, the Son of God, and all the gods of heaven become his brethren. His bones are the gods and goddesses of heaven. His right side belongs to Horns, and his left side to Set. The goddess Nut makes him to rise up as a god without any enemy in his name, God, and God calls him by his name. His face is the face of Apwat, His eyes are the great ones among the souls of Anu. His nose is Thoth. His mouth is the great lake. His tongue belongs to the boat of right and truth. His teeth are the spirits of Anu. His chin is Kurt, Kent, Sekhem. His backbone is Sema. His shoulders are Set. His breast is Beba, etc. Every one of his members is identified with a god. Moreover, his body as a whole is identified with the God of heaven. For example, it is said concerning Unas, "Thy body is the body of Unas this. Thy flesh is the flesh of Unas this. Thy bones are the bones of Unas this. Thy passage is the passage of Unas this. The passage of Unas this is thy passage." Further, this identification of the deceased with the God of heaven places him in the position of supreme ruler. For example, we have the prayer that Unas may rule the 9 gods and complete the company of the 9 gods. And Pepi the first, in his progress through heaven, comes upon the double company of the gods, who stretch out their hands, entreating him to come and sit down among them. Identification with Horus. Again, the deceased is changed into Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis. It is said of Pepi the first, "Behold, it is not Pepi who entreateth to see thee in the form in which thou art, O Osiris, who entreateth to see thee in the form in which thou art, O Osiris, but it is thy son who entreateth to see thee in the form in which thou art, Osiris. It is Horus who entreateth to see thee in the form in which thou art, and Horus does not place Pepi at the head of the dead, but among the divine gods." Elsewhere, we are told that Horus has taken the eye and given it to Pepi, and that the odor of Pepi's body is the odor of the eye of Horus. Throughout the pyramid texts, the Osiris of the deceased is the son of Tamu, or Tamu-Ra, Shu, Tafnut, Seb, and Nut, the brother of Isis, Nephthys, Set, and Thoth, and the father of Horus. His hands, arms, belly, back, hips, and thighs, and legs are the god of Tamu, and his face is Anubis. He is the brother of the moon. He is the child of the star Sothis. He revolves in heaven like Orion and Sothis, and he rises in his place like a star. The gods, male and female, pay homage to him. Every being in heaven adores him. And in one interesting passage, it is said of Pepi the first that when he hath come forth into heaven, he will find Ra standing face to face before him, and having seated himself upon the shoulders of Ra, Ra will not let him put himself down again upon the ground. For he knoweth that Pepi is more shining than the shining ones, more perfect than the perfect, and more stable than the stable ones. When Pepi standeth upon the north of heaven with Ra, he becometh Lord of the universe, like unto the King of the gods. To the deceased, Horus gives his own Ka, and also drives away the Kas of the enemies of the deceased from him, and hamstrings his foes. By the divine power thus given to the deceased, he brings into subjection the cause of the gods and other cause, and he lays his yoke upon the cause of the triple company of the gods. He also becomes Thoth, the intelligence of the gods, and he judges hearts. In the hearts of those who take away his food, and the breath from his nostrils become the prey of his hands. The place of the deceased in heaven is by the side of God, in the most holy place, and he becomes God and an angel of God. He himself is triumphant, and his Ka is triumphant. He sits on a great throne by the side of God. The throne is of iron ornamented with lions' faces, and having the hoofs of bulls. He is clothed in the finest raiment, like unto the raiment of those who sit on the throne of living right and truth. He sits on a great throne by the side of God. The throne is of iron ornamented with lions' faces, and having the hoofs of bulls. He is clothed in the finest raiment, like unto the raiment of those who sit on the throne of living right and truth. He receives the Urarit crown from the gods, and from the great company of the gods of Anu he thirsts not, nor hungers, nor is sad. He eats the bread of Ra, and drinks what he drinks daily. And his bread also is that which is spoken by Seb, and that which comes forth from the mouth of the gods. He eats what the gods eat. He drinks what they drink. He lives as they live, and he dwells where they live. All the gods give him their food, that he may not die. Not only does he eat and drink their food, but he wears the apparel which they wear, the white linen and sandals. He is clothed in white, and he goeth to the great lake in the midst of the field of peace, whereon the great gods sit. And these great and never-failing gods give unto him of the tree of life, of which they themselves do eat, that he likewise may live. The bread which he eats never decays, and his beer never grows stale. He eats of the bread of eternity, and drinks of the beer of everlastingness, which the gods eat and drink. And he nourishes himself upon that bread, which the eye of Horus has shed upon the branches of the olive tree. He suffers neither hunger nor thirst like the gods Shu and Tefnut, for he is filled with the bread of wheat, of which Horus himself has eaten. And the 4 children of Horus, Hapi, Tuimatef, Kebsenu, and Amset, have appeased the hunger of his belly and the thirst of his lips. He abhors the hunger which he cannot satisfy, and he loathes the thirst which he cannot slake. But he is delivered from the power of those who would steal his food. He is washed clean, and his Ka is washed clean, and they eat bread together forever. He is one of the 4 children of Horus who live on right and truth, and they give him his portion of the food with which they have been so abundantly supplied by the god Seb, that they have never yet known what it is to hunger. He goes round about heaven even as they do, and he partakes of their food of figs and wine. Those who would be hostile to the deceased become thereby foes of the god Tamu, and all injuries inflicted on him are inflicted on that god. He dwells without fear under the protection of the gods, from whose loins he has come forth. To him the earth is an abomination, and he will not enter into Seb, for his soul hath burst forever the bonds of his sleep in his house which is upon earth. His calamities are brought to an end, for Unas hath been purified with the eye of Horus. The calamities of Unas have been done away by Isis and Nephthys. Unas is in heaven. Unas is in heaven in the form of air. In the form of air he perisheth not. Neither doth anything which is in him perish. He is firmly established in heaven, and he taketh his pure seat in the boughs of the bark of Ra. Those who row Ra up into the heavens row him also, and those who row Ra beneath the horizon row him also. The life which the deceased leads is said to be generally that of him who entereth into the west of the sky, and who cometh forth from the east thereof. In brief, the condition of the blessed is summed up in the following extract from the Pyramid of Pepi the First. Hail, Pepi! Thou hast come, thou art glorious, and thou hast gotten might like the god who is seated upon his throne, that is Osiris. Thy soul is with thee in thy body, thy form of strength is behind thee, thy crown is upon thy head, thy headdress is upon thy shoulders, thy face is before thee, and those who sing songs of joy are upon both sides of thee. Those who follow in the train of God are behind thee, and the divine form who make God to come are upon each side of thee. God cometh, and Pepi hath come upon the throne of Osiris, the shining one who dwelleth in Natat, the divine form that dwelleth in Tini hath come. Isis speaketh unto thee, Nephthys holdeth converse with thee, and the shining ones come unto thee, bowing down even to the ground in adoration at thy feet. By reason of the writing which thou hast, O Pepi, in the region of Sa. Thou comest forth to thy mother Nut, and she strengthened thy arm, and she maketh a way for thee through the sky to the place where Ra abideth. Thou hast opened the gates of the sky. Thou hast opened the doors of the celestial deep. Thou hast found Ra, and he watcheth over thee. He hath taken thee by thy hand. He hath led thee into the two regions of heaven, and he hath placed thee on the throne of Osiris. Then hail, O Pepi, for the eye of Horus has come to hold converse with thee. Thy soul, which was among the gods, came unto thee. Thy form of power, which was dwelling among the shining ones, came unto thee. As a son fighteth for his father, and as Horus avenged Osiris, even so doth Horus defend Pepi against his enemies, and thou standest avenged, endowed with all things like unto a god, and equipped with all the forms of Osiris upon the throne of Khent Amenta. Thou doest that which he doeth among the immortal shining ones. Thy soul sitteth upon its throne, being provided with thy form, and it doeth that which thou doest in the presence of him that liveth among the living, by the command of Ra, the great God. It reapeth the wheat, it cutteth the barley, and it giveth unto thee. Now, therefore, O Pepi, he that hath given unto thee life, and all power and eternity, and the power of speech in thy body is Ra. Thou hast endured thyself with the forms of God, and thou hast become magnified thereby before the gods who dwell in the lake. Hail, Pepi, thy soul standeth among the gods and among the shining ones, and the fear of thee striketh into their hearts. Hail, Pepi, thou placest thyself upon the throne of him that dwelleth among the living. And it is the writing which thou hast into their hearts. Thy name shall live upon earth. Thy name shall flourish upon earth. Thou shalt neither perish nor be destroyed forever and forever. Side by side, however, with the passages which speak of the material and spiritual enjoyments of the deceased, we have others which seem to imply that the Egyptians believed a corporeal existence, or at least in the capacity for corporeal enjoyment in the future state. This belief may have rested upon the view that the life in the next world was but a continuation of the life upon earth, which it resembled closely, or it may have been due to the survival of semi-savage gross ideas incorporated into the religious texts of the Egyptians. However this may be, it is quite certain that in the 5th dynasty, the deceased king Unas eats with his mouth and exercises other natural functions of the body and gratifies his passions. But the most remarkable passage in this connection is the one of the pyramid of Unas. Here, all creation is represented as being in terror when they see the deceased king rise up as a soul in the form of a god, who devours his fathers and mothers. He feeds upon men and also upon gods. He hunts the gods in the fields and snares them, and when they are tied up for slaughter, he cuts their throats and disembowels them. He roasts and eats the best of them, but the old gods and goddesses are used for fuel. By eating them, he imbibes both their magical powers and their coups. He becomes the great form, the form among forms, and the god of all the great gods who exist in visible forms. And he is at the head of all the Sahu, or spiritual bodies in heaven. He carries off the hearts of the gods and devours the wisdom of every god. Therefore, the duration of his life is everlasting, and he lives to all eternity. For the souls of the gods and their coups are in him. The whole passage reads, "The heavens drop water, the stars throb, the archers go round about, the bones of Akaru tremble, and those who are in bondage to them take to flight when they see Unas rise up as a soul in the form of the god who liveth upon his fathers and who maketh food of his mothers. Unas is the Lord of wisdom, and his mother knoweth not his name. The gifts of Unas are in heaven, and he hath become mighty in the horizon, like unto Tamu, the father that gave him birth. And after Tamu gave him birth, Unas became stronger than his father. The cause of Unas are behind him. The sole of his foot is beneath his feet. His gods are over him. His Ura'i are upon his brow. The serpent guides of Unas are in front of him, and the spirit of the flame looketh upon his soul. The powers of Unas protect him. Unas is a bull in heaven. He directeth his steps where he will. He liveth upon the form which each god taketh upon himself, and eateth the flesh of those who come to fill their bellies with the magical charms ill the lake of fire. Unas is equipped with power against the shining spirits thereof, and he riseth up in the form of the Mighty One, the Lord of those who dwell in power. Unas hath taken his seat, with his side turned towards Seb. Unas hath weighed his words with the hidden God, who hath no name. On the day of hacking in pieces the firstborn, Unas is the Lord of offerings, the untire of the knot. He himself maketh abundant the offerings of meat and drink. Unas devoureth men and liveth upon the gods. He is the Lord to whom offerings are brought, and he counteth the list thereof. He that cutteth off hairy scalps and dwelleth in the fields hath netted the gods in a snare. He that arrangeth his head hath considered them good for Unas, and hath driven them unto him, and the cord master hath bound them for slaughter. Khonsu, the slayer of his lords, hath cut their throats, and drawn out their inward parts. For it was he whom Unas sent to drive them in. And Shesem hath cut them in pieces and boiled their members in his blazing cauldrons. Unas hath eaten their magical powers, and he hath swallowed their spirits. The great ones among them serve for his meal at daybreak. The lesser serve for his meal at eventide. And the least among them serve for his meal in the night. The old gods and the old goddesses become fuel for his furnace. The mighty ones in heaven shoot out fire under the cauldrons, which are heaped upon with the hunches of the firstborn. And he that maketh those who live in heaven to revolve around Unas hath shot into the cauldrons the haunches of their women. He hath gone round about the two heavens in their entirety, and he hath gone round about the two banks of the celestial Nile. Unas is the great form, the form of forms, and Unas is the chief of the gods, invisible forms. Whatever he hath found upon his path, he hath eaten forthwith. And the magical might of Unas is before that of all the Sahu who dwell in the horizon. Unas is the firstborn of the firstborn. Unas hath gone round thousands, and he hath offered oblations unto hundreds. He hath manifested his might as the great form through Sa and the gods. Unas repeateth his rising in heaven, and he is the crown of the gods. Unas hath eaten the red crown, and he hath swallowed the white crown. The food of Unas is the inward parts, and his meat is those who live upon magical charms in their hearts. Behold, Unas eateth of that which the red crown sendeth forth. He increaseth, and the magical charms of the gods are in his belly. That which belongeth to him is not turned back from him. Unas hath eaten the whole of the knowledge of every god, and the period of his life is eternity, and the duration of his existence is everlastingness. In whatsoever he wisheth to take, whatsoever form he hateth, he shall not labor in the horizon forever and ever and ever. The soul of the gods is in Unas, their spirits are with Unas, and the offerings made unto him are more than those made unto the gods. The fire of Unas is in their bones, for their soul is with Unas, and their shades are with those who belong unto them. Unas hath been with the two hidden Ka gods, who are without power. The seat of the heart of Unas is among those who live upon this earth forever and ever and ever. The notion that by eating the flesh, or particularly by drinking the blood of another living being, a man absorbs his nature or life into his own, is one which appears among primitive peoples in many forms. It lies at the root of the widespread practice of drinking the fresh blood of enemies, a practice which was familiar to certain tribes of the Arabs before Muhammad, and which tradition still ascribes to the wild race of Chatham, and also of the habit practiced by many savage huntsmen of eating some part, for example the liver, of dangerous carnivora, in order that the courage of the animal may pass into them. The flesh and blood of brave men also are, among semi-savage or savage tribes, eaten and drunk to inspire courage. But the idea of hunting, killing, roasting, and eating the gods, as described above, is not apparently common among ancient nations. The main object of the dead king in doing this was to secure the eternal life, was the peculiar attribute of the gods.